Overthinking is like being trapped in a storm that never lets up. The mind spins non-stop. Each idea seems louder than the last, and little by little you sink into doubt and indecision. It's like trying to move forward in an endless downpour. You lose clarity, you lack the energy to act, and you end up motionless, even as you keep thinking and thinking, searching for a way out. Has it ever happened that you circle the same problem all night and in the end resolve nothing? That's exactly what excessive thinking does. It steals your peace and keeps you from moving forward. Yet hundreds of years ago, a warrior found a way to calm that inner storm. His name was Miyamoto Musashi, a samurai who was never defeated. Musashi didn't just face opponents with a sword. He also fought his own inner battles: fear, doubt, insecurity. In his writings, he left a legacy that goes beyond war. Practical principles for everyday life, to train the mind, overcome fear, and break free from that invisible prison called overthinking. His wisdom wasn't only for warriors, but for anyone who, in today's world, struggles with anxiety and mental overload. What was extraordinary about Musashi wasn't only his skill with the blade, but his way of thinking, clear, focused, and disciplined. We're not going to put on armor or brandish katanas today. Our battlefield is different. The modern mind, with its constant distractions, the noise of social media, work pressure, and endless comparisons with others. Musashi's path is, in truth, a path to inner freedom, freeing yourself from mental noise, from the doubts that hold you back, and from the paralysis that keeps you from living fully. If you're ready, let's begin this journey through Musashi's 12 principles, teachings that remain relevant centuries later. You'll notice they can transform the way you think, make decisions, and build your life. The first principle says, perceive that which cannot be seen. Overthinking doesn't begin outside, in what happens in the world, but inside, in those inner battles we almost never acknowledge. This first lesson isn't about mystical powers or supernatural visions. It's about looking inward with courage. And although it sounds simple, very few dare to do it. Looking within is uncomfortable because that's where your fears, insecurities, and those truths you prefer to cover up with distractions appear. Today, we live in a world that rewards distraction. We spend hours scrolling on our phones, watching series, listening to music, or piling on activities so we don't have to be alone with ourselves. But Musashi understood something profound. As long as you don't face what's hidden inside you, your fears, your insecurities, your repressed desires, you'll remain trapped in mental chaos, no matter how hard you try to ignore it. Overthinking is almost never about the problem itself. It's almost always about the fear underneath. You worry about an exam, but the root isn't the test. It's the fear of feeling not good enough. A decision at work makes you anxious, but what truly weighs on you is the fear that others will see you as a failure. Overthinking feeds on those hidden shadows. Those hidden fears are like shadows that lengthen inside you. You can't face them unless you first recognize them. Musashi reminds us that the real battle isn't outside against the world, but inside, against those invisible zones of the mind that silently paralyze us. Think about how hard it is today to remain in silence. For many people, it's almost impossible to be alone in a quiet room without pulling out the phone, turning on the TV, or finding any excuse to distract themselves. Why? Because silence has a special power. It reveals what we hide, those thoughts and emotions we don't want to look at directly. When we remove external noise, the mind begins to speak clearly. It shows you where in your life you feel weak, where you feel lost, or which part of you fears not being enough. And here's the problem. Many times we don't want to hear those truths, so we run away by filling ourselves with noise. But every time we avoid facing them, overthinking grows and becomes stronger. Instead of accepting that discomfort, our usual reaction is to try to control everything in the mind. We think and think, as if planning every detail or anticipating every scenario could eliminate fear. But the opposite happens. The more we think, the more power we give fear. It doesn't disappear, it grows. Musashi's proposal is radical yet liberating. Instead of running away, face the invisible. Dare to name that fear. When you acknowledge it, it loses strength. It's like turning on the light in a dark room. What seemed like a monster was only a shadow. This teaching isn't exclusive to Musashi. Throughout history, philosophers and thinkers have reached the same conclusion. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, those parts of ourselves we reject, but that end up ruling our lives in secret. Marcus Aurelius, for his part, reminded us that it isn't events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. In both cases, the message is clear. Mental freedom begins when we stop denying what is hidden and face it honestly. Naming what you fear isn't easy because it demands brutal honesty with yourself. It means admitting that your perfectionism, more than a sign of excellence, may be a mask to hide insecurity, or that your habit of worrying about everything isn't foresight or preparation, but distrust in your own strength. These truths hurt, but they also set you free. When you take that step and accept those truths, something changes. The mental noise begins to fade. The storm is still there, but it loses force because it's no longer being fed by self-deception. Let's take a simple example. Imagine you want to apply for a new job, but you hold yourself back with excuses like, "I'm not ready yet," or "I don't have enough experience." In reality, the root is usually something else: fear of rejection, fear of being told you're not enough. Recognizing that changes everything, because once you name the fear, it no longer holds the same power over you. Once you recognize that fear, you can respond to it with clarity. You remind yourself, rejection doesn't define me. It's just part of the growth journey. That's how paralysis begins to fade and action becomes possible. When hidden truths are faced, overthinking loses the battle. That's why Musashi valued training so highly. For him, training wasn't just technique, it was a way to bring the invisible to light. Every duel and every challenge revealed a weakness he needed to confront and turn into strength. That was his way of growing. You don't fight with swords, but you do face your own battles. An uncomfortable conversation, a demanding project, a decision that scares you. Each situation is an opportunity. The big question is, are you going to avoid those moments, or use them as mirrors to discover what you truly need to work on within yourself? Every doubt isn't mere indecision. It's an invitation to look deeper and find the fear behind it. Most people never do this. They live on the surface, fighting shadows without recognizing that those shadows are projections of their own inner world. And so the same cycle repeats again and again: endless thoughts, doubts, insecurity. But those who apply Musashi's teaching do the opposite. They choose courage. They allow themselves silence. They write their fears in a notebook, and they ask uncomfortable questions. What is my real fear? What story am I telling myself that isn't true? What pain am I hiding by staying stuck in this spiral of thoughts? These questions are like a sword that cuts through the fog. When you start to look at what you didn't want to see, a new strength emerges within you. You're no longer a slave to hidden fears or insecurities disguised as prudence. You regain your power to choose with clarity. Over time, you discover that overthinking begins to take up less space in your life. The storm weakens because you've learned to name the shadows. That's exactly what Musashi did. His true victories weren't only over rivals in combat, but over the invisible enemies that lived within him. And if you dare to walk this path, you'll see that clarity, confidence, and freedom aren't external rewards. They're already within you, waiting to be discovered. You only need the courage to look at yourself honestly. So here's my question to you. What fear am I refusing to see? What insecurity did I bury so deeply that it now directs my thoughts from the shadows? Second principle. There is more than one path to the top of the mountain. One of the most common traps of overthinking is believing there's a single right answer, a single perfect path to success. That idea makes every decision feel like a life or death exam, when in reality there are multiple ways to get where you want to go. With that mindset, every decision becomes unbearable. The smallest choice seems loaded with irreversible consequences. So you delay action because the fear of making a mistake paralyzes you. You fill your head with scenarios, trying to calculate every detail, as if life were a chess match in which you knew all your opponent's moves. But real life doesn't work like that. Life isn't a straight single-lane highway. It's more like a mountain with many possible trails. Musashi's reminder is liberating. There isn't only one perfect route. There are many, and all of them can take you to the summit. This principle breaks the paralysis of perfectionism and opens the door to action. What matters isn't finding the perfect path, but choosing one and committing to it. Real progress is built by walking, adapting to changes in the terrain, being flexible when circumstances call for it. Absolute perfection is an illusion, but the commitment to move forward is what transforms you. You surely know someone, or maybe it's happened to you, who gets stuck in analysis paralysis. They want to start a business but won't choose because they're searching for the perfect niche. They want to improve their health but spend months researching diets instead of simply going for a walk or exercising. Or they want to learn something new but jump between courses, apps and tutorials without committing to any of them. The result? They don't move. Believing there's only one right way is like living inside a mental cage. Musashi warns us about this deception. What truly matters isn't the trail, but keeping on climbing. Even if the path is longer or harder, what counts is advancing. This idea also exposes an uncomfortable truth. The obsession with doing everything perfectly is born out of fear. We think, if I make a mistake, it'll be a disaster, so I have to calculate every last detail. But that endless waiting is the real mistake, because while you analyze, life passes by and opportunities are lost. Every day you spend debating in your mind is a day you lose for growing, making mistakes, learning and adapting. The time you spend doubting never returns. The Stoics taught this too. Epictetus said, "You cannot control outcomes, only your actions." Marcus Aurelius advised, "Don't waste your life speculating. Invest it in living with virtue." In both cases, the message is the same one Musashi reminds us of. Stop obsessing over finding the perfect route and start walking the one in front of you, with discipline. Life is full of examples that confirm this. People who drop out of college and end up building multi-million-dollar businesses. Others who change careers midway and discover that the out-of-place experience becomes the key to their later success. The common pattern isn't that they chose the perfect path, but that they dared to move forward and adapt. The shared lesson is clear. These people didn't find the magic path. They simply moved and adapted as they climbed the mountain. Overthinking would have told them to wait for absolute certainty. Musashi would have told them, climb anyway. There's more than one trail to reach the summit. Perfectionism often disguises itself as ambition. We tell ourselves, I just want to do it as well as possible. But beneath that mask, there is often fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of failing, fear of wasting time and being judged by others. The truth is that failure doesn't mean everything is over. On the contrary, it's just another path upward. If you stumble on a steep trail, you learn to keep your balance. If you choose a longer route, you develop patience and endurance. Every path teaches something that the perfect ideal would never give you. What was truly brilliant about Musashi was that he didn't try to avoid mistakes. He used them as part of his training. Every fall, every stumble was another brick in his path to mastery. How do you apply this in your life? Start by breaking the idea that your next decision must be flawless. If you're between two jobs, don't ask which one is perfect. Ask which one you can commit to and grow in. That's the key. If you're planning a project, avoid spending months fine-tuning a plan you never launch. Build an initial version, start, and correct along the way. Flexibility is power. Rigidity is a trap. Musashi said that a warrior who knows only one technique is doomed, but one who adapts will never be cornered. This outlook doesn't just calm your mind, it transforms it. The weight of "I must be perfect" falls from your shoulders. You realize the mountain doesn't care which path you choose. The only thing it asks is that you keep climbing. Overthinking loses power when you accept that mistakes are part of the process. They don't mean you're not enough. They mean you're climbing. And life opens up when you trust yourself to adapt, no matter which trail you take. Ask yourself, in what area of my life am I stuck because I keep waiting for the perfect option? What dream am I postponing for fear of choosing wrong? And most importantly, What would happen if I accepted that there are many valid paths and that the real mistake is walking none of them? Third principle, do nothing that is not useful. It may sound obvious, almost like common sense, but Musashi saw it as a vital rule. In his time, doing something useless in the middle of combat could cost him his life. In our time, doing things with no value robs us of energy, peace of mind, and direction. You might think, I already know that. But if you look at your life honestly, you'll discover that much of your time, energy, and attention goes into things that don't bring you closer to your goals or contribute to your growth. Overthinking grows like weeds in those wasted spaces. When you fill your life with unimportant things, the mind amuses itself by inventing problems that don't actually exist. When you let yourself be dragged by distractions, automatic habits, or meaningless activities, your mind gets saturated with noise, and in that noise is where overthinking flourishes. Musashi proposed a clear recipe: eliminate what doesn't serve, cut the unnecessary, and focus on the essential. That clarity is what calms the mind. Look at everyday life. How many hours slip by scrolling through social media without even remembering what we saw? How many times do we argue in our heads about a conversation that will never happen, or worry about what others think, even though their judgments have no real impact on our lives? All of that is hauling stones up the mountain, only to drop them halfway. It exhausts you, but it doesn't bring you any closer to any goal. These are the modern equivalents of useless effort. They spend energy, consume time, wear down your mind, but take you nowhere. Our mind is incredibly powerful, but if we feed it only trivialities, it ends up spinning in circles without rest. The problem isn't the mind itself. It's the mental diet we give it. Just as a body can't be healthy eating only junk food, the mind can't be clear if it's fed distractions and superficialities. Musashi practiced discipline in every aspect of his life. Every step, every sword stroke, every word had intention. In combat, an unnecessary movement could cost him his life. For him, usefulness was a matter of survival. For us, it's a matter of freedom. If we want peace of mind, we must learn to live with intention. When you remove what's useless from your daily life, your mind feels lighter, with space to focus on what matters. Seneca said it centuries ago. It's not that we have little time, but that we waste much. Musashi thought the same. Wasted energy doesn't just steal productivity, it also feeds mental restlessness. The more you eliminate the unnecessary, the less room there is for overthinking. A real example: you sit at the computer determined to work, but first you check your phone for a moment. That moment becomes half an hour. Then, instead of concentrating on your task, you open tab after tab, or you spend more time researching the perfect productivity system than doing the work itself. In the end, hours go by, and you haven't moved forward on anything meaningful. Then comes the frustration. You feel anxious, mentally heavy, trapped in thought loops. Why? You spent your energy on things that don't add up. When it finally comes time to focus on what matters, you're already exhausted. The antidote lies in this principle: stop feeding overthinking. It's not just about cutting superficial distractions, but about learning to live with intention. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Does it bring me closer to my goals, or does it just help me avoid what truly matters? When you scroll endlessly, watch another video, or replay a debate in your head, the question is, are you moving forward, or are you just standing still? Overthinking appears when the mind has no purpose, and then it invents problems. But when your life is focused, when you act with clear direction, there's no room for those mental spirals. Purpose clears the noise. This principle isn't only about how you spend your time, it's also about what you allow into your mind. Thoughts like self-pity, jealousy, or resentment aren't useful. They don't solve anything. They only poison you. Musashi said a warrior couldn't afford to rehearse his defeat in his head. Neither should you. Next time you notice your mind getting tangled, ask yourself one question: is this thought useful? If the answer is no, let it go. Imagine you're carrying a heavy backpack on a climb. Every useless thought is like an extra stone. Musashi would tell us, travel light, leave the rocks behind. It's important to be clear that do nothing useless doesn't mean draining color or joy from life. On the contrary, it means cutting waste. Sharing a meaningful conversation is useful. Walking in nature is useful. Resting to renew yourself is useful. What's useless is excess. Those automatic habits that drain you instead of giving you life. Overthinking doesn't show up because you do too little, but because you do too much of what doesn't help. When you simplify, your mind calms down and clarity returns. How to apply this principle? Start small. Look at your routine and identify one habit that adds nothing. It could be 2 hours lost on social media, gossip conversations that wear you out, or mentally replaying a mistake 1,000 times. Choose one of those habits and eliminate it. Replace it with something purposeful. Read a book, exercise, or make progress on an important task. You'll notice your mind feels lighter and gains clarity. Musashi wasn't talking about minimalism as a trend. He was talking about survival. For him, a useless move in combat meant death. For us, a useless action can mean losing peace, focus, and valuable opportunities. As long as you keep feeding your mind with distractions, overthinking will keep growing. But when you apply Musashi's rule, every focused decision becomes a strike that weakens that mental storm. Over time, you'll notice your life becoming clearer, your mind more disciplined, and your focus stronger. The prison of overthinking doesn't break with one blow, but with 1,000 small decisions to let go of what doesn't serve. Now it's your turn. Ask yourself honestly, what am I doing that adds nothing? Which thought, habit, or distraction drains my energy without giving anything in return? And most importantly, what would my life look like if I had the courage to let it go? The clarity you're searching for doesn't appear by thinking more, but by letting go of the useless until only the essential remains. Only then does the mind find calm. If these reflections strengthen you, subscribe and tap the bell to receive each new teaching that can transform your life. Fourth principle, today's victory over yourself from yesterday. Overthinking often springs from an obsession with the future. What will happen? What comes next? What will I do if everything goes wrong? Musashi reminds us that the only comparison that matters isn't with tomorrow or with others, it's with yourself. True progress isn't measured by comparing yourself to others. There will always be someone younger, with more resources, with more success. That race never ends, and only leads to frustration and anxiety. Musashi knew this. The most important battle is internal. The right questions are, was I more disciplined today than yesterday? Am I a bit more focused, clearer, stronger? That kind of comparison is what breaks the paralysis of excessive thinking. When you compare your present to your recent past, you can see real progress. You don't need to solve your entire life in a single day. It's enough to add small victories step by step, every day. A warrior doesn't reach mastery overnight. He gets there by repeating small wins, beating laziness, getting up to train even when he doesn't want to, silencing doubt when it appears, going through fear instead of running from it. The constant repetition of these everyday battles is what forms the master. Overthinking appears when you look at the whole mountain and think, it's impossible. Wisdom appears when you look only at the next step and take it decisively. Reflect on this. Writing 1 page a day becomes a book. Saving a small amount each day becomes financial security. Lifting a little more weight each week turns you into a strong person. Big achievements are simply the sum of small steps repeated with discipline. Obsessing over enormous goals holds you back. Committing to small steps sets you free. Musashi understood that confidence doesn't come from overthinking, but from the evidence of your own actions. Each day you choose discipline over distraction, focus over noise, courage over fear. You create living proof that you can trust yourself. That steady accumulation destroys overthinking. You no longer need to ask, will I be able to do it? You know, because you see it in your daily small victories. Here's a practical exercise. Stop obsessing over what will become of me in a year. Ask instead, what can I do today to be a little better than yesterday? That question redirects your energy. Instead of spending energy speculating about what's coming, invest it in winning small victories right now. Each day brings a new chance to win. Even if you fell yesterday, today you have the chance to get up and do better. Overthinking weakens when you replace it with action. Musashi didn't conquer the future by thinking, he conquered it by acting today. That's the key difference, so don't obsess over being perfect tomorrow. Focus on being a little better today. If today you defeat your yesterday self, the future will take care of rewarding you. Fifth principle: do not be led by pleasure. Overthinking often begins because we chase what gives us immediate satisfaction instead of what truly builds us in the long term. Musashi understood that instant pleasure can become a dangerous trap. A warrior who seeks comfort doesn't train. A leader who tries to please everyone ends up losing his principles. And anyone who lives only for instant gratification becomes a slave to their own desires. This is where overthinking grows most. We confuse what we want now with what we truly need. We tell ourselves, "I want it," but deep down we know it doesn't bring us closer to our purpose. That contradiction opens the door to guilt and an endless loop of doubt. Musashi's strategy was clear: train the mind to choose the right path, even if it's the hardest one. Pleasure itself isn't bad, but when you take it as the compass for your life, you end up lost. Simple example: staying in bed looking at your phone is more pleasant than getting up to train. Fast food gives immediate pleasure, but doesn't nourish like a healthy meal. Impulse shopping is exciting in the moment, but it takes you farther from bigger goals like traveling, investing, or having stability. Immediate pleasure gives a short burst of well-being, but leaves long consequences: anxiety, lack of control, emptiness. Musashi didn't preach rejecting all joy. He wasn't an extremist. What he taught was discernment. What feels good isn't always what's right or necessary. The path of discipline means choosing what makes you grow, not what merely entertains you or lulls your mind to sleep. Modern example: someone fixated on how many likes or comments they get on social media. Each notification gives immediate pleasure, but it also creates dependence, generating anxiety for the next click. Real power lies in living by clear principles, not by passing impulses. Every time you choose what's right over what's merely pleasant, your mind grows calm. Overthinking decreases because you know you're acting in alignment with what truly matters. Ask yourself this key question: am I choosing this because it makes me stronger, or only because it gives me momentary comfort? That single reflection can change your course. Sixth principle: think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. Overthinking often starts from looking too much at ourselves. We fill our heads with questions. What will they think of me? Am I doing this perfectly? What if I fail? When you're overly focused on yourself, you turn every action into a public exam. Every mistake seems huge. Every sidelong glance becomes a judgment. You end up trapped in a mirror of anxiety that only reflects your insecurity. Musashi understood this trap well: the ego. When you think too much about yourself, you become a slave to approval and praise, but also to the fear of criticism and rejection. Musashi's way out is simple: shift the focus. Thinking lightly of yourself doesn't mean you lack value. It means you free yourself from the weight of constant self-scrutiny. That creates space to see beyond. At the same time, think deeply about the world. Observe people, pay attention to what's happening around you, notice the patterns and causes behind things. When your gaze leaves the mirror of your mind and opens to the world, the inner noise diminishes. Simple example: you're in a conversation and instead of listening, you're thinking, am I saying the right thing? How do I sound? That generates anxiety. But if you drop that self-observation and truly listen, the conversation flows and the anxiety fades. Overthinking is almost always an overinvestment in your self-image. You worry more about how you look than about what really matters. When you think lightly of yourself, you give yourself permission to be human, to fail, learn, and continue. You stop believing you're the center of the universe and become an active part of it. This isn't about belittling yourself. It's about freeing yourself. Thinking deeply about the world means committing to something bigger than you. Your family, your community, your art, your mission, or your faith. When your energy is directed there, insecurities lose strength because your mind no longer has space to obsess over the trivial. The paradox is clear. The more you stare at yourself, the more doubts you have. The more you give yourself to something greater than you, the more confidence and clarity you find. Musashi became a legendary warrior, not because he sought applause or fame, but because he devoted himself to a larger cause: mastery of his path. Overthinking loses power when you stop asking, "What do they think of me?" and start asking, "How can I contribute more here and now?" Ask yourself, in what area of my life could I think less about myself and more about something worthwhile, something bigger than me? Seventh principle: do not cling to possessions you no longer need. Overthinking feeds on attachment. And we're not just talking about material objects, but also ideas, identities, and expectations we carry, even though they no longer serve us. Musashi was a wandering warrior. He didn't accumulate excess things. His power lay in traveling light, being able to adapt quickly without anything tying him down. That lightness was part of his life strategy. Attachment has a curious effect. What you think you possess ends up possessing you. An object, a habit, or an idea becomes an invisible chain that weighs you down and holds you back. Overthinking grows with attachment. Fear of losing what you have. Fear of ceasing to be who you think you are. That fear turns into a wheel of worries that never stops. Example: someone obsessed with their image. Every day they pour energy into their clothes, how others see them, what people say. That obsession binds them, and their mind never rests because they're always comparing and worrying. Another example: someone clinging to the past. They keep replaying the good old days in their head and comparing everything to what's already gone. That nostalgia, instead of motivating, keeps them trapped in thoughts of loss. Detaching doesn't mean not loving or not valuing. It means being free. When you aren't tied to your things or your old ideas, you can act with clarity and lightness. Musashi wasn't talking about being poor for the sake of it, but about being free, not being a slave to what you don't need. Ask yourself now, what am I carrying that I no longer need? An object, a thought, an old identity that no longer has value but that I keep dragging along. Overthinking loses power when you learn to travel light. Each thing you let go of is like breaking a chain that had you trapped. Eighth principle: do not lament what you have lost. Overthinking tends to stick to the past. The mind repeats over and over what could have been done differently, as if reliving it would change the outcome. Musashi understood that lamenting is a waste of energy. The battle is over. The duel has ended. Staying hooked on what might have happened only ties you to ghosts that exist solely in your head. This is where overthinking grows strong. The mind believes that by replaying the story, it will find peace. But it never does, because the past cannot be changed. Clear example: someone who relives a breakup again and again. They analyze every conversation, every word, every mistake. They think that will close the chapter, but in reality, it only deepens the wound. Another example: someone who missed a job opportunity and can't stop thinking about what they could have done better. Meanwhile, new opportunities pass right in front of them, but they don't see them because they're still tied to the past. Detaching from the past doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means not chaining yourself to it. Grief is inevitable and human. Constant lamentation is a choice. Musashi never said you shouldn't feel pain. What he taught was not to cling. Feel the loss, but don't become it. Life will always bring losses: people, things, seasons. What matters is your decision. Will you keep looking back, or will you use that experience to move forward more lightly? Overthinking loses strength when you accept that the past cannot be changed. What you need is not more analysis, but acceptance. Ask yourself honestly, what loss am I still lamenting? What story do I keep replaying in my mind even though it's over? What would my life look like if I stopped repeating that chapter and focused on what's in front of me now? Ninth principle: do not be led by resentment or envy. Overthinking finds plenty of fuel in comparison. We ask ourselves, why does he have what I don't? Why did they treat me like that? Why does no one recognize my effort? That kind of questioning lights a fire that never goes out. There will always be someone who has more than you. There will always be unjust moments. There will always be recognition that never arrives. Musashi understood this well. Neither envy nor resentment harms the other person. They harm you, because they consume you from within. Overthinking grows stronger on this ground. The mind replays grievances, injustices, other people's achievements, again and again, and the cycle never ends, because comparison has no finish line. Modern example, someone who spends hours on social media looking at perfect lives in edited photos. Their mind fills with comparisons. They're happier, more successful, more complete than I am. And with every scroll, the wound grows. Another example, someone who relives a past injustice and tells it over and over, until resentment becomes part of their identity. Musashi taught us to cut those chains. Resentment and envy are invisible shackles that only bind you to suffering. Freedom appears when you understand that others' success doesn't erase your own, and that the injustice of the past no longer needs to be replayed in your mind. Overthinking loses power when you choose gratitude instead of comparison, acceptance instead of resentment. The Stoics knew this too. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and ignorant in matters outside your control." Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Both lines are swords that cut the cycle of resentment and envy. Ask yourself now, what story do I keep telling that only feeds resentment? What comparison steals my peace? And what would happen if, instead of carrying that weight, I chose to focus on my own path? 10th principle, do not be led by desire or unbridled passions. Overthinking often grows when we desire too much. The mind becomes obsessed. When I have this, when I achieve that, then I'll be happy. Musashi understood that unrestrained desire is another form of slavery. If your peace depends on always getting what you want, you will never be truly free. Here, overthinking flourishes because desire is never satisfied. You hit a goal and immediately another appears. You complete one objective and you're already chasing the next. It's a wheel that never stops, and the mind never rests. Real example, someone obsessed with success. Each achievement lasts minutes because they're instantly worried about the next one. Or someone obsessed with their appearance who never feels enough, because there will always be someone more attractive to compare to. Excessive desire turns life into a race with no finish line, and overthinking runs beside you, wearing you out without end. Musashi's teaching wasn't to eliminate desire altogether, but to tame it. When you guide it with discipline, it can be a driver of growth. When it runs wild, it becomes a driver of destruction. Example, the desire to improve your body. With discipline, it motivates you to train and take care of your health. With obsession, it pushes you to overtrain, get injured, and feel perpetually dissatisfied. Another example, the desire for success. With principles, it propels you to work with purpose. With ego, it turns you into someone willing to do anything, even abandon your values, and still never feel satisfied. Musashi taught that a warrior led by unbridled passion wears himself out and makes mistakes. By contrast, one guided by clarity and discipline conserves his energy. 11th principle, do not neglect what truly matters. Overthinking often arises because we fill our minds with trivial things and end up forgetting the essential. Musashi expressed it practically. A warrior cannot focus only on his armor and neglect his sword. If he does, he loses what truly gives him an advantage in battle. In daily life, it's the same. We spend hours checking email, chats, news, and social media, but neglect what matters most, our health, our close relationships, and our life's purpose. Here, overthinking finds fertile ground. The mind stays busy with the urgent but irrelevant. We feel like we're doing a lot, but in reality, we're just avoiding what truly gives life meaning. Example, someone spends hours organizing their to-do list, but never touches the key project. Or someone keeps a calendar full of meetings and commitments, but never stops to share a real moment with their family. Musashi taught that clarity comes from focusing on the essential. Ask yourself, if your life were a battle, what would be your sword? What can you not afford to neglect without putting yourself at risk? For some, that essential sword is health. For others, integrity or time with loved ones. Neglecting those things while focusing on the trivial guarantees feelings of emptiness and dissatisfaction. Overthinking loses power when you return to the essentials. You no longer drown in minor details because your energy is directed toward the core, and the core always brings clarity. Ask yourself, what can I not afford to neglect? How can I make sure I give it my best attention every day, even through small acts? 12th principle, do not fear death. Overthinking has a deep root, fear. Fear of the end, of losing what we have, of ceasing to be who we are. As a warrior, Musashi lived close to death. Every duel was a real possibility of losing his life. If he let fear dominate him, he would be paralyzed. That's why he learned to act with clarity, even under that shadow. The fear of death is the fuel of overthinking, because it is the ultimate fear. We know it will come, and that we cannot control it. So the mind spins without rest, inventing ways to escape something inescapable. Musashi didn't live by denying death. He accepted it, and in that acceptance he found his true freedom. Because when you stop fearing death, you also stop fearing to live fully. The Stoics agreed with this view. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not that we have little time, but that we waste much." And also, do not live as if you were eternal. Death surrounds you while you have life. Use it well. Overthinking weakens when you accept that time is limited. In that instant, life becomes clearer because you understand it isn't worth wasting it on doubts that lead nowhere. A clear example, someone who keeps their dreams in the someday drawer. Someday they'll write the book, someday they'll travel, someday they'll ask for forgiveness. But often that someday never arrives. Musashi saw in death a reminder, live with purpose now, not later, so don't fear death. What you should truly fear is not having lived fully while you had the chance. Ask yourself this powerful question. If today were your last day, what would remain unsaid, untried, unloved? And more importantly, what can you do today to keep it from being left undone? These 12 principles aren't just for samurai or ancient warriors. They're a map for any of us who fight day by day with the storm of overthinking. Musashi didn't write with dead history in mind, but with living life. His words are for those of us who face invisible battles, those inner wars that can't be seen but are felt in the heart and mind. If you listen closely, his words still resonate today. Clarity amid confusion, discipline in the face of doubt, action in the face of fear. The storm of overthinking doesn't have to rule your life. You can train your mind just as a warrior trains his sword, with practice, patience, and resolve. When you train this way, you discover a freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances, but on your inner clarity. Musashi's path was never to run. He didn't flee his fears or deny his doubts. He faced them with strategy, discipline, and vision, and we can do the same, here and now. Tell me in the comments which principle resonated most with you. And if you want to keep receiving the wisdom of Musashi and other great masters, subscribe and turn on the bell. The best is yet to come. Because in the end, life will always be a battle, not against external enemies, but against the fog we carry within.